basement of 46 Lower Belgrave Street was supposed to be a place of quiet domestic routine. Instead, on a cold November evening in 1974, it became a slaughterhouse. When investigators descended the narrow stairs, they were met with absolute darkness. But what the lights eventually revealed cemented this address in true crime history. The floor was slick, the walls painted with a violent geometry that whispered of a terrifyingly precise ambush. For decades, the public narrative painted the attacker as a desperate, bumbling aristocrat spiraling out of control, a man snapping under immense gambling debts and a bitter custody dispute. But the physical remnants left in that subterranean kitchen tell a different story. The brutal murder of Sandra Rivet was not a frantic crime of passion. It was a meticulously calculated execution that simply caught the wrong victim in its snare. To understand the true violence, we must focus on the red thread connecting every shattered piece of that night. That thread is the blood spatter analysis. Forensic specialists examining the basement crime scene did not find the chaotic, overlapping smears typical of a frenzied struggle. Instead, they documented distinct, directional arcs radiating across the walls. These patterns were a silent, irrefutable witness to the mechanics of the assault. The cast-off stains mapped the exact trajectory of a blunt instrument, a lead pipe wrapped in tape. By measuring the angle of the blood droplets, investigators reconstructed the killer's physical posture. The strikes were not wild. They were rhythmic, forceful, and delivered with terrifying consistency. The attacker stood in wait, completely still, allowing the victim to step fully into the kill zone before unleashing perfectly targeted blows. This level of physical control shatters the myth of a panicked amateur. John Bingham, known as Lord Lucan, cultivated the image of a gentleman gambler. Beneath that polished exterior lay a man capable of chilling premeditation. The forensic timeline dictates he removed the light bulb at the bottom of the stairs well in advance. He plunged the basement into darkness, turning a familiar domestic space into an engineered trap. Sandra Rivet stepped into that trap armed only with a tea tray. She was simply performing her evening routine. The blood evidence proves she never had the chance to raise her hands in defense. The first strike was immediate and catastrophic, designed to incapacitate instantly. The lack of defensive wounds or secondary struggle patterns on the lower walls confirmed the ambush was entirely one-sided. She was felled in seconds. The violence was only the first phase. The most damning piece of physical evidence speaking to cold calculation was a canvas United States mailbag, folded and waiting near the point of attack. This was not a household item hastily grabbed in panic. It had been brought to the scene deliberately, intended to serve as a makeshift body bag. The killer planned the immediate concealment and disposal of the corpse. Transfer stains on the canvas and floor revealed the grim logistics of the aftermath. After the fatal blows were struck, the body was dragged with grim efficiency. The blood-pooling patterns indicated a brief pause, a moment where the killer attempted to execute the next phase. The mailbag was positioned to swallow the evidence of the crime, allowing the murderer to walk away and let the victim vanish. This forensic reality creates a chilling paradox. How did an aristocratic gambler orchestrate such a clinical strike? The answer lies in the blinding nature of class privilege. Early observers assumed Lucan was too refined, too incompetent to pull off a premeditated hit. But the evidence in the basement stripped away his title, leaving only a cornered predator who believed he could solve his ruin with a single untraceable act. The flawless execution of this dark plan was derailed by a single, unpredictable variable. Sandra Rivet was not the intended target. The trap had been set for Lucan's estranged wife, Veronica. When Veronica noticed the tea was taking too long, she descended the stairs, interrupting the killer's cleanup. The ensuing confrontation shattered the controlled environment. A secondary attack began, pushing the violence out of the shadows. The forensic contrast between the two assaults is staggering. While Sandra's murder was marked by the clean, directional spatter of an ambush, the blood evidence upstairs told a story of chaos. Smears on the banister and overlapping drops on the carpets documented a frantic struggle. Veronica fought back, disrupting the killer's rhythm. The precise executioner was suddenly forced to improvise, and his meticulously crafted timeline collapsed. Realizing his grand design had failed, the attacker fled into the London night, initiating an infamous manhunt. Lord Lucan vanished, slipping through the fingers of a police force always one step behind. The prevailing theory was that he threw himself into the English Channel, unable to live with a botched crime, but the physical evidence left in his wake suggests a man still very much in control. Days later, investigators located his borrowed Ford Corsair abandoned in the coastal town of New Haven. The interior of the vehicle was a secondary crime scene, heavily stained with the consequences of that night. Blood typing and pattern analysis directly linked the driver to the basement, but it was the nature of these stains that offered the next crucial insight. They were transfer marks, concentrated on the steering wheel and seat. The vehicle's forensic profile did not indicate a man succumbing to a frantic panic. The blood in the Corsair belonged to Sandra and Veronica, carried out of the house on the killer's clothes. The distribution of the stains showed deliberate, sustained driving. He had navigated through hours of darkness, executed a planned route to a coastal escape point, and calmly parked the vehicle. This was a calculated backup plan. In the immediate aftermath, while the blood was still drying on his hands, Lucan was writing letters to his friends. The tone was composed, self-pitying, and devoid of genuine remorse. He framed himself as the victim of a terrible misunderstanding. This psychological detachment perfectly matches the cold-blooded geometry of the basement ambush. He was a man capable of entirely compartmentalizing his own monstrous actions to preserve his self-image. The dragnet expanded globally, chasing shadows across continents. Sightings poured in from Australia and Africa, turning a brutal murder into an international parlor game. The media obsession with the vanishing Earl slowly eclipsed the reality of what happened in that subterranean kitchen. The narrative shifted from the forensic horror of a bludgeoned nanny to the aristocratic mystique of a man who successfully beat the system and disappeared. True crime investigation demands that we anchor ourselves to the physical reality, to the red thread that cannot be manipulated. The myth of Lord Lucan is built on a foundation of aristocratic privilege and speculation. The truth of John Bingham is permanently etched into the walls of 46 Lower Belgrave Street. The blood evidence stripped him of his mystique, exposing a calculating killer who destroyed an innocent woman's life. By returning to the foundational evidence, the forensic timeline reconstructs the exact anatomy of the crime. The removed light bulb, the waiting mailbag, the precise angle of the lid pipe, the immediate attempt to bag the body. Every single data point converges on premeditated murder. The paradox of the bumbling aristocrat is resolved by the undeniable efficiency of the violence. It was a perfect crime, ruined only by a tragic coincidence. The weight of this physical evidence led to a historic legal outcome. In 1975, a coroner's jury took the unprecedented step of naming Lord Lucan as the murderer of Sandra Rivet. They did not need a confession. They did not need the suspect in custody. The blood spatter had already testified on his behalf, laying out a timeline of malice aforethought that no defense attorney could ever dismantle. The ghost of Lord Lucan may still wander through the realm of unsolved mysteries, a phantom sustained by rumor and class intrigue. But the investigation into the basement attack leaves no room for doubt about the man he truly was. The silence of that dark room was broken by the forensic truth. The blood evidence remains the definitive record of that night, a permanent testament to a cold-blooded execution.